Daf Kuf Lamed Ches Amud Aleph, 7 lines from the top at the 2 dots. Ve'ein noislan l'tluya b'Shabbos. You are not allowed to pour wine through a suspended strainer, to pour the wine through it on Shabbos. That separates the wine from the sediments. It's separating, so you're not allowed to do it on Shabbos. What's the din if he did it? Is he over? Is it a deraisa or is it a rabbanan? Amar of Kahana Shimer Chayv Chatas. He says it's a malach deraisa. You're separating the sediments from the wine. It's a malach deraisa separating. It's Chayv Chatas. Maskif l'Rav Sheshes. How could you say it's a deraisa? Mi'i kamidi the rabbanan Chayv Chatas. Rabbi Lezer shor lechatchila. How could it be that you're saying that according to the rabbanan it's a nisr deraisa or Chayv Chatas, and Rabbi Lezer be machad lechatchila? They wouldn't be so far apart in their opinions over here. It's not mistaber to say that. Well, I'll show you a case where we do see that the Tanoim argue, and they do have that kind of a discrepancy. That one is Mechayv Chatas, the other says it's Mutar L'Chatchila, Olam Aloi. The case of Arei Yishal Zov, the jewelry called Irshal Zov. It was golden jewelry. It had etched on it the Yerushalayim, the city of Yerushalayim. The Rameir Mechayiv Chatas Rameir holds it's not attached, and it's like carrying. And therefore, if an Isha goes out wearing it, it's not considered a tafshid. It's not something that would be normally worn as jewelry, and therefore Yechayiv Chatas. The Rabbi Eliezer Shorei L'Chatchila. And Rabbi Lezer says it's mutar l'chatchila. So you see, we do have this type of a discrepancy. So why over here would you say anything different? Mahi, what's the case of the Irshal Zov? The Sanya lo yitzei isha b'Irshal Zov. That it says that she cannot go out wearing a Irshal Zov, that type of jewelry. V'im yotza chayv chatas de Rameir. And Rameir says if she did, she's chayv chatas. Chom say no, that she's not allowed to go out with that, and she did. It's betur. It's also midrabanan, but not the raisa. But Rabbi Eliezer, but Rabbi Eliezer says it's mutar l'chatchila. So you see this discrepancy between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Meir. The Rabbi Meir says it's chayv chatas. Rabbi Eliezer says mutar l'chatchila. Amar le Abaya. Misa Rabbi Lezer ad Rameir koi. He says no, you can't compare the cases. Over there, it's not that Rabbi Lezer is arguing with Rameir. Misa Rabbi Lezer ad Rameir koi do Amar chayav chatas. He's not contrasting his opinion to Rameir says chayav chatas ad Rabban koi do Amar pater v'lasa. He is the Chomsei pater v'lasa, and in contrast to that, Rabbi Lezer says it's mutar l'chatchila, but he's not in contrast to Rameir, who says that you're chayav chatas. Over here, we have the machlokes in the Mishnah is mentioned directly. The two together are mentioned directly together. Rabbi Lezer and the Chachamim. It's not mistaber to say that they would have that kind of a discrepancy. The Chachamim would say that it's chayav chatas, and Rabbi Lezer says mutar l'chatchila. Taisa says, I don't really understand what is the distinction. Seif kol seif. You do have this discrepancy that Rameir says by the Irshal Zov is chayav chatas, and Rabbi Lezer says that it's mutar l'chatchila. So why does it make a difference if his opinion is stated next to what the Chachamim say that it's pater v'lasa? Seif kol seif. You have the two Tanoim that Rameir says Chayv Chatas and Rabbi says Mutar L'Chatchila. So Taisus doesn't explain it. Perhaps the pshat is as follows. It's not to say when we say, is it mistaber to say that Rabbi Lezer would say that it's a Mutar L'Chatchila and Chacham would say Chayv Chatas. When we have a machlokes, if one opinion is one day holds that something is fundamentally also, and other ones that fundamentally it's mutar. They argue, is this a malach or not? It's not that we can't say that one is says chayv chatas and one says mutar l'chatchila. In the case of the Irshal Zov, there's a fundamental machlokes. Reb Meir says that it's not jewelry. It's considered to be therefore carrying. It's chayv chatas. Both the Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer hold over there that it is jewelry. Now, just because Rameir holds it's not jewelry, it's not a tachshit, it doesn't mean that they would necessarily say that therefore it must be also midrabanan. They have a fundamental machlokes and they argue totally, and they say it is a tachshit, so therefore it should be mutter. Now, the chachamim over there, when they say that it's also midrabanan, it's not because they're chayshish, for Rameir says that it's not considered jewelry. They hold it's jewelry, it's a tachshit. Why do they say that it's also midrabanan? Not because they're chayshish for what Rameir said. It's because they're afraid that Anisha might take it off and show it to her friend and come to carry it. And on that, Rabbi Elazar says, we're not concerned about that. We're not concerned. It's not a chashash because man darka, who's a derech to go out with this type of a jewelry, is an isha chashuva, a wealthy, prominent woman. And the isha chashuva, it's not her derech to take off the jewelry and show it to a friend. But there's just because Rameir says it's a masoi, that doesn't necessitate the Chachamim saying it's also midrabanan. They say it's also midrabanan for a totally different reason, because a woman might take it off and show it to her friend. Now over here, however, in our case, they both agree that this is a form of separating. When you're straining something, you're pouring the wine through a strainer, you're separating. Separating is a malach. So why over here does Rabbi Elazar say it's mutar lecharchila? Because he says it's shaloi kedarek. It's shaloi kedarek. It's shaloi kedarek. It's not the usual way of doing it. Now, in such a case, when they both fundamentally agree that it has the aspects of a malacha, it's just a question, is it considered a shinui, is it considered shaloi kederech? Over here, it's not mistaber to say, the Chacham would say it's completely a malacha, it's done in the normal way of a regular malacha, and the Rabbi Elazar would agree that it has the fundamentals of a malacha you're separating, but it's considered such a shinui, it's so different from it's out of the norm to such extent that it's mutar lecharchila. That's not mistaber to say. If they both agree that there is separation over here, and they both agree that it would be, if done in a normal way, it's a malacha, it's not mistaber to say that the Chum say it's completely the derech, it's completely the norm, and Rabbi Elazar says it's so out of the norm that it's even mutar lecharchila. That's not mistaber to say. What is the hasra that we give over here? What do we warn the person? If he's straining him, and we warn him, you're not allowed to do this on Shabbos, and we strain, what do we give him hasra from? Now, meaning we wanted to be doicha that it's not mistaber to say that it's a deraisa, but that the Gemara is not accepting that techiyah, and therefore it does hold that straining according to the Chachamim is considered to be a deraisa. On the tzad that it's deraisa, what is the hasra? What do you warn the person for if he's doing b'mezid? What do we tell him? Don't do this because it's a malacha of what? Rabbi Amar Mishum Bayrer, he says it's Bayrer. Rabbi Zera Amar Mishum Merakin, he says it's Merakin. Rabbi says it's Bayrer, it's separating, and Rabbi Zera says it's sifting. Omar Rabba Kavasi di Mistaber, it's more mistaber the way I'm saying it. Ma Darka Shel Bora Naitaloyachim Psoilas, because by Bayrer, what's the manner of Bayrer is that when you separate, you're Naital the Eichel, you remove the Eichel and you leave the Psoilas. Over here, the same thing is when you're straining the wine, so the sediments stay on top, and the wine goes on the bottom. So what you're doing is you're straining the wine below. You're removing the wine, the oichel, and you leave the psilos. So that's boirer. Boirer is your noitel the oichel and menech the psilos. Taisus on Daf Ayin Hey asks a kasha that on $9 rather asks a kasha, and that we say over there the boirer is not that way. That boirer, you remove the psilos, you're removing the psilos, and you leave the oichel. So Taisus says the fundamental principle is that it depends what is the majority, what is the roiv. You always separate the minority. No reason you would take the majority of it, that's more work. You take what the miyut is, you remove the miyut, and then you're left with what you want, with the desirable amount. So when we say over there is that the derech of boirer is to remove the psilos, is that when the majority what you have is oichel, is, for instance, if you have the grain, and you have some pebbles or some chaff that's mixed into it, so you remove that, you're removing the psilus. That's boyer in that case. But what you have is the majority of it is psilus, then what you remove is the oichel. You're always removing, the derech of boyer is to do a minimum amount of work, so you remove the minority, the miut, and you leave the roiv. So in this case that we're talking over here is that the dregs are the majority of it, and the wine is the miut, so the derech is to remove the oichel and to leave the psilus. Rabbi Zer says, it's more mistaber to say that what I'm saying, that it's meraked, that it's sifting, when you sift, so you sift flour through a sieve. So when you sift it, that the flour flows to the bottom, and the psilus remains on top of the sieve. Here also, when you strain the wine, the oichel flows down to the bottom, and the sediments are on top on the strainer. So it's psilus lamala, and oichel is lamata. So it's similar to merakid. So Rashi explains is that when Rava says that it's boyer, he's moida that it's also merakid, that you could be masra for merakid. He's moida to that as well, because it's certainly doimet to sifting. But he says that you can also be masra for boyer. Boyer is also similar to boyer, so you could be masra for boyer as well. That's what Rashi's sheet is. Other Rishonim learn differently. The Ran says no, it's a basic machlekes. Reb Zera says it's merakid, not boyer. Rava says it's boyer and not merakid. Why is that? It seems to be exactly like sifting the flour. It seems to be exactly the same way. The Ran makes a distinction. He says that by sifting, by merakid, is with a dry good. It's flour. This is with a liquid. So it's not similar to a merakid. According to Rava, it's similar to boyer, because the case of the malacha of merakid is by something which is yovesh, which is the flour. The Bir Halacha has a different chiluk. He says that when you sift, you're actually doing a maisa to both the oichel and to the psilus. When you sift, you don't just pour it, you have to shake it back and forth. That's a typical way of sifting it's not a liquid, it doesn't flow through. He makes a distinction not between a liquid and a solid, but that by sifting, you're doing a maisa, you're doing an action to both the oichel and the psilus. You shake it around, you sift. So therefore, he says over here, by pouring the wine through the strainer, it's not a sifting process in that way. It flows on its own. So the maisa that you're doing is not with both the oichel and the psilus. You're pouring it through the strainer, and then it flows on its own. The wine flows to the bottom. So you're not doing an action to the both of them, to shaking them back and forth. Find in the Gemara Tani Ram Bar Yecheskel Talis Kafula Lo Yasim. You can't make a tent with a folded talis v'masa pater v'lasa. So they used to make on a frame. They used to make on a frame and fold over a talis, and it used to drape from on the roof and drape over to the sides. That's why it's called talis kafula. It's really just a tent, but it's called kafula because it drapes over the sides. So you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. V'masa it's pater v'lasa, it's also midrabanan. This is not considered a deraisa because it's only in a temporary oil, but it's also midrabanan. But Rami Bar Cheskel says, if there was a string or rope tied around it before Shabbos, so if it was tied to it, and then mutar l'ntaiser l'charchila, then you're allowed to do it. Even l'charchila, you're allowed to do it, because then, in this case, you're only being moisef al an oil arai, it's already tied to it, and it's already over there, it's already suspended to it. You're just drawing it over. It's made to be open and closed that way. It's made to be open and close it there. So it's only considered in that way, Moisev and Aloy L'Rayim, it's mutter lechadchila in such a case. There's a machlokes rishonim, the Rif and the Rosh. Are we talking where it has an oil of a tefach, where there is on the roof of it is a tefach or more area, or dafke if it's less than a tefach? According to the Rif, it's only if it's less than a tefach, but if there be a tefach, it would still be also midrabbanan. The Rosh says no. If it's less than a tefach, you don't even need a chut or meshicha, you don't need a rope tied to it. We're talking in a case where it does have an oil of a tefach, and nevertheless, since it has a string attached to it, it's mutter l'chadchila. Boim Rav Kahana me'rav kilo mao. What's the din by a canopy? Amaliaf mita asuri says even a bed is awesome. Not only a canopy, even a bed is awesome. Mita mao. What's the din of a bed? Amaliaf kilo muteras. He says even a kilo is muter. Kilo mitu mao. What about a kilo and mita? Amalei kilo asura mitu muteras. A kilo is also mita is muter. So what is the pshat? The Gemara is going to explain. Where did he say when he said even a bed is also, not only a canopy, even a bed is also a kirakamanoid? Like we learned previously, like the beds that they used to make over there, which were sectional. So it was assembled, and we're afraid that he might, Shema Yitzhaka, maybe he might fasten it securely and fix it in place over there, which would be considered to be either Makabah, Pantash, or Boina. So over there we say in that type of a bed, it's also Exera, Shema Yitzhaka. It's also, but a normal bed would be Mutter. So a normal bed, even though it's standing upright, to put it down, like a Murphy bed, to put it down, even though it's now creating an oil underneath the bed, that is mutter l'chadchila because that's only temporary in nature. Where did he say even a canopy? So a canopy, you're putting a covering, an awning over the bed. That's Kidram Bar Cheskel, like similar to the case of Ram Bar Cheskel, where it's tied with a rope, a string from before Shabbos. Kila Surah Mitu Muteres. Where did he say a kila canopy is also but a bed to take a bed that's folded up and bring it down, that it's muteres can be done in a normal R types of beds where there's no string attached to it. It's not like the case of the kilo of Ram Cheskel, and it's not a bed of karmanoi, it's not sectional. I saw the canopies on the house of Rav Huna Negira, that in the evening they were spread out. And then in evening, and then in the morning, rather, they were put on the ground, which means is that they removed it. They removed it on Shabbos, and therefore they can remove it on Shabbos. Means if you can remove it, you can also put it back. Binyan and stira are interrelated. So therefore, he said he saw their kila, and in the evening it was spread out. In the morning, it was on the ground. Must be that they removed it. Must be that they held it's mutter l'chadchila. Taisus explains that perhaps the reason that they were allowed to remove it and put it back is perhaps that because it was like Rami Bar Cheskel, that it was tied with a string from before Shabbos, and that's why they were allowed to remove it. If it was tied with a string, there was mutter l'chadchila to remove it, which means that they would be allowed to put it back on as well, because they're interrelated, the two, binyan and stira are interrelated. And perhaps the reason it was mutter l'chadchila was because of Rav Bar Cheskel, that it was tied with a rope or string, but otherwise, in a chanami, it would be also. Amarav mishum Rabbi Chia vilain a curtain mutter l'toisa mutter leforkai. A curtain is not included in this Isser D'Rabbanan. We say that it's making a temporary oil is also midrabbanan, and we said the kila would be also, but a curtain which doesn't have a roof, it's just a curtain. A curtain would be mutter to hang it up and to take it down.